We're here to discuss the little Gazas that have risen up on campuses across America and the liberal college administrators and politicians who refuse to restore law and order and to protect other students. These little Gazas are disgusting cesspools of anti-Semitic hate, full of pro-Hamas sympathizers, fanatics, and freaks. Here's just a sampling of what these lunatics were saying just days after Hamas's atrocity against Israel. A Cornell professor called the October 7th attack exhilarating. A Columbia professor called it awesome. A Yale professor called it an extraordinary day. More than 30 Harvard students signed a letter claiming that Israel was, quote, entirely responsible for the attack. A pro-Hamas student group at University of Virginia called Hamas terrorists Palestinian resistance fighters. And remember, this was all before Israel had seriously retaliated. The terrorist sympathizers in these little Gazas aren't peacefully protesting Israel's conduct of the war. They're violently and illegally demanding death for Israel, just like their ideological twins, the Ayatollahs in Iran. Just look at what's going on in these little Gazas. These criminals are chanting eliminationist slogans like, from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, and globalize the Intifada. At Stanford, they wore Hamas headbands. At Princeton, they flew the Hezbollah flag. At Harvard, they ripped down the Stars and Stripe and replaced it with the Palestinian flag. At George Washington University, they called for the final solution and posted signs saying they wouldn't leave until Jews go back to their real homes. And look at some of the consequences. At Columbia, a rabbi had to tell students that the university was no longer safe for Jews. At UCLA, Hamas sympathizers blocked Jewish students from attending classes and assaulted Jewish students. USC canceled its graduation out of fear of pro-Hamas riots. It's time to stop these anti-Semitic pro-Hamas mobs today. And if liberal college administrators won't take action, the mayors and the governors of these campuses should. And so should Joe Biden. When will the president himself, not his mouthpieces, condemn these hate-filled little Gazas? President Biden needs to denounce Hamas's campus sympathizers without equivocating about Israelis fighting a righteous war of survival. The State Department needs to yank the visas of foreign students in these little Gazas, and DHS needs to deport them. The Justice Department should investigate the funding sources behind these little Gazas, and the Department of Education needs to withhold funding for colleges that won't protect the civil rights of their Jewish students. Instead, Joe Biden is putting more pressure on Israel these days than he is on Hamas itself or on the pro-Hamas chapters on America's campuses. But I guess that's what we should expect from the leader of a Democratic Party that has let its anti-Semitic elements fester and grow for years. Another 4 years for Joe Biden means another 4 years of little Gazas all across America. And that's something I suspect the American people will keep in mind this November. Senator Cornyn?
Yep. Senator, thank you. What would you like to see Leader Schumer do over in the Senate? What do you make of the action the House is going to take today on their end?
Well, Senator Schumer, like Joe Biden, should stop equivocating between Israel fighting a righteous war for survival and all these pro-Hamas sympathizers on campuses in these little Gazas. For example, when he meddled 2-3 weeks ago calling for new elections in Israel. Maybe Israelis think we should have new elections in New York. Second, I suspect the House of Representatives is going to pass a law today adopting the international definition of anti-Semitism. That's a bill that we should promptly bring to the floor and pass over here as well. Those are just a couple examples. I don't know, Senator Marshall, Senator Ernst, if you have anything else.
The International Holocaust Remembrance Alliance's definition of anti-Semitism includes anti-Zionism, and some people would argue that anti-Zionism is not inherently anti-Semitic. Do you agree with that or disagree with that?
I would submit that some people would be very wrong about that. It's just an example of how Israel is held to a unique standard in the world, not just by, say, the United Nations or the International Criminal Court, but by Joe Biden and other Democrats here in the United States. If you demand something of Israel that you don't demand of every other nation, if you threaten their leaders with arrest warrants, if you build these little Gazas on campuses to protest what Israel is doing, you don't do it against, say, Bashar al-Assad for what he's done to his own people, or what Hamas has done to the Arabs living in Gaza, then that is a double standard. That is the definition of anti-Semitism. So anti-Zionism does belong in that definition.
Yeah. I learned so much in college, and one of the things I learned on a bus trip from El Dorado, Kansas to San Angelo, Texas for the national track meet is I learned a lot about folks that were a different skin color than I was. And it was the first time in my life I was in the minority. A long, long bus ride. But what I learned is that the people that are being discriminated against get to define what's insulting and what's not insulting. That we don't get to define that. So if my Jewish friends feel insulted when the term Zion is used, which it is, it's another term for being pro-Israel in a lot of ways as well. So I wouldn't be mincing differences there.
This is actually very follow what Senator Marshall said. Congresswoman Jaya Paul yesterday was asked, quote, what would your message be to a Jewish student who doesn't feel safe on their own campus right now? She replied saying, it is really important to educate yourself about what is anti-Semitic and is not anti-Semitic, and then said there are things that are being called anti-Semitic that are not anti-Semitic, if you could just react to that.
Joni, you want to?
I would just say anytime a person feels threatened, then they are being threatened. It's just that simple. I don't know that she can define it. I think the person that feels threatened certainly could define it.
I think when you have Jewish students who have to live through these little Gaza encampments where pro-Hamas sympathizers are saying, go back to your real home, or calling for a final solution, or spray painting swastikas on your campus, there's little question that those Jewish students justifiably feel intimidated and harassed, and that college administrators are not doing their job to protect the civil rights of those Jewish students.
I just got to add one more comment. It kind of makes my blood boil. You know, I'm very sensitive as an obstetrician to women getting every opportunity that guys have. And one of my frustrations, whether I'm here or back home, is mansplaining. And a woman will feel insulted because they're getting mansplained to them. And you would ask the man and say, well, I didn't mean any harm here. Well, he doesn't get to decide what man-explaining is and what it's not. And here's a lady, a good friend of mine you're talking about, that she gets to explain to Jewish people when they should and shouldn't feel insulted. And if you feel insulted, you should educate yourself. I think that's a total cop-out. I'm just, that really disturbs me. Again, we've all been in those situations. If you feel intimidated, if you feel like people are hating on you, it doesn't mean I get to react in a violent way against it, but how you feel is not determined by the person that's doing the persecution, right? Yeah, very bad.
Respectfully, Senator, do you really think that every student there hates Israel and supports Hamas? Don't you think that many students and American people just don't want to be more Palestinian?
And who are you with? I'm sorry? Who are you with?
Okay.
So every student in these little Gazas is either violating the law or violating campus rules. They have a right, if they want to go out and make fools of themselves and protest on behalf of Hamas if they're American citizens. But they don't have a right to build little Gazas in violation of the laws, committing trespass, committing disorderly conduct, in many cases committing felonies through burglary or destruction of property. That is what they do not have the right to do. And yes, whenever you're saying go back to your real home, or painting swastikas on campuses, or flying the Hezbollah flag, or wearing a Hamas headband, then you are not protesting Israel's conduct of their righteous war of survival. You are sympathizing with Hamas.
And I would remind you, too, that at Columbia, there were 3 maintenance workers that were barricaded into a building and not allowed to leave.
Yeah, and
that's not okay, right?
And regardless of what their feelings are, these students' feelings are, they're breaking the law. It has not, what they're When they're keeping other students from going to school, when they're preventing graduation from happening, they're breaking the law. And we should not encourage them to keep breaking the law and teach them how not to be good citizens. I absolutely respect their voice, but there's a right way to protest and there's a wrong way to protest. And they're infringing on the other students' rights by preventing a normal day from happening. I couldn't imagine my son or daughter at Kansas State University at KU and not being able to go to school today for a lot of reasons, let alone miss their graduation. I think that's just a horrible scenario right now, and it's the wrong thing to teach our young adults.
I think we've got to go vote on a doubtless unqualified judicial nominee. So last question.
Back to the Jewish students that feel threatened, what's your message to them, and what would you advise them to do on an individual level?
Well, first off, one of the reasons why we had this press conference, why all of us have been speaking out on this issue, is to try to encourage these college administrators to take charge of their own campuses and to protect the rights of these Jewish students. And for that matter, any student who just wants to study for final exams and finish the semester in peace without having little Gaza disrupting them 24 hours a day. Second, a lot of these universities are going to face massive lawsuits. Like look at UCLA, where you have Jewish students who are being blocked from entering their classrooms by a bunch of pro-Hamas radicals wearing masks and keffiyehs like it's some scene out of the 1930s in Germany. So a lot of these students should be consulting with a lawyer, because by the time this is all said and done, they may have buildings on these campuses named after them. And they shouldn't hesitate. They shouldn't hesitate to go to the local authorities as well. If the administrators on campus won't protect them, then they have every right to go to the local authorities and ask for their protection as well. Just a few things that they should do. Most importantly, they should know that all of these pro-Hamas fanatics in Little Gaza may be getting a lot of attention now, but the vast majority of normal, sane, patriotic Americans support them, not Hamas.